to say something that may surprise everyone. I'm a lifelong Republican. When I went to college, it was a very liberal college. I had to restart the college Republicans on our campus. I became the state chairman of the college Republicans when I was in college. I fought long and hard to get the first ever Republican majority in the House and the Senate in the state of Louisiana. I tell you all that because what I might say next might surprise you. As we sit here today, I am actually angrier with the Republicans in D.C. than I am with the Democrats. Now, why do I say that? I want to actually give the Democrats a compliment. At least they're honest about what they believe. I'm angry at the Republicans because they say one thing during an election, they do another thing when they get elected. Too often it seems like our only choices are between honest socialists and lying conservatives. That's a heck of a choice, by the way. I'm actually to a point where I think it's just time to fire them all, to force term limits down their throats so they actually have to live under the same rules and laws they pass for the rest of us. Now, what do I mean by that? Last year they told us, give them the majority. They said, give us the majority and we will take care of Obamacare and amnesty. And we did our part. They asked for your volunteer hours, they asked for your donations, they asked for your votes, and we delivered across this country. We have the House and the Senate. So what happened on Obamacare? Do you know Republican leaders were actually in D.C. happy that the Supreme Court ruled against us on Obamacare? They didn't want to do the hard work of getting rid of Obamacare. Only in D.C. is losing a good thing. They didn't want to do the hard work to say we can't afford an entitlement program on top of the ones we've already got. They didn't want to do the hard work to say that it is time to repeal all of it instead of trying to be cheap Democrats. What happened on amnesty? They said they were going to stop the president from breaking the Constitution, breaking the law. Nothing happened. If we were serious, we could secure the border in 6 months. We know why the left doesn't want to secure the border. Now, for Republicans, we know there are big business interests in D.C. that tell them we want open borders, we want amnesty, we want Common Core. Folks, it's time to fire those folks. The Republican Party shouldn't be the party of big government, but we also shouldn't be the party of big business either. But last year, if that wasn't bad enough, look at where we are this year. After these barbaric videos of Planned Parenthood came out, you would think finally the Republican Party would be able to stand up and defend innocent human life. At the very least, defund this awful organization. Several days ago, Mitch McConnell waves the white flag of defeat. Says, no, never mind, we're not serious. We can't really defund Planned Parenthood. In Louisiana, we're not just talking about it. We have defunded Planned Parenthood. They didn't like that. They wanted to protest at the governor's mansion. We're hospitable in the South. So I said, they have a right to be there, but we should provide some entertainment. We put up a big outdoor screen and we showed those videos over and over so they had nowhere to hide. By the way, if you're curious, it acts like mosquito repellent. It keeps pests away. If you put it out there, found out they didn't like it so much. Now they've taken us to court and the Obama administration has joined them. He doesn't have time to watch the videos. He has time to send his lawyers to Baton Rouge to sue us. I don't care how many times he sues us. We're not going to back down from this fight. I've said this in the debate. I said they better hope Secretary Clinton becomes president. Because President Jindal will send the IRS and the Department of Justice to go after Planned Parenthood. The reporters didn't like that afterwards. The media said, well, you can't really need that. I said, let me be clear. We'll send the Department of Justice, the IRS, we'll send the EPA, we'll send OSHA, we'll send every government agency we can find. I'm pro-life, but I would hope even folks that aren't pro-life would be offended by the barbaric descriptions we heard on those videos. I can't even barely watch those and hear those videos. But it wasn't just defunding Planned Parenthood. Look at this awful Iran deal. Now, let's review what's happening. The Iranians conned President Obama, and then President Obama conned the Senate Republicans. The only people he can out-negotiate are in the House and the Senate. They passed this awful Corker bill. Instead of taking a 2/3 vote to approve the bill, now it takes a 2/3 vote to disapprove this awful deal with Iran. Every Senate Republican except Tom Cotton voted for that bad bill. Every one of them, including all the ones running for president. Rubio and Cruz and Graham and Paul, they all voted for it. Now that we've got this bad bill, why in the world wouldn't they go to the president and say, you're not in compliance with the Corker bill? You said you were going to share with us the deal, but what about those side deals, the private deals we don't get to see? Why in the world? I asked Lindsey Graham this to his face last week in the second debate. I said, Why in the world wouldn't you use the nuclear option today to stop the government of Iran, the regime in Iran, from becoming a nuclear power? If there was ever a time to say, look, nowhere in the Constitution does it say you need 60 votes to stop a bad deal. Why not say we've got more than 51 votes, we're going to stop this? Because they don't want to fight. I wish our Republicans had half the courage, half the backbone, half the fight the Democrats have. I don't agree with the Democrats have done, but you've got to admire Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, President Obama. This is a very backhanded compliment. But remember when they wanted to get Obamacare done? They lost the 60th vote in the Massachusetts Senate race. That didn't stop them. They crammed it down our throats. Now, I don't want Republicans to break the Constitution or break the law the way the Democrats have to get Obamacare done, but at the very least, we should fight half as hard for our principles. What a radical idea if we actually endorsed our own principles for a change. You heard Jeb Bush say we've got to be willing to lose the primary in order to win the general election. Let me translate that for you. That is the establishment saying hide your principles, hide your values, so that we can get the left and the media to like us. Folks, I'm here to tell you that never works. If we do that again, we will lose again. We will deserve to lose again. Our country doesn't need us to be a second Democratic Party or a second liberal party or a cheaper version of the Democratic Party. You know, the reality is this: if the Republican Party can't make defending innocent human life a winning issue nationally today, maybe it's time to fold up our tents and start a new movement. That's how angry I am, and that's how much I think it's time just to fire them all. And I mean it, we need term limits. We don't need lifelong politicians who think they live under separate rules from the rest of us. Why am I so angry? Well, the reason I'm so angry is the idea of America is slipping away from us. This is the most important election in our lifetimes. What do I mean about the idea of America slipping away? Look at how much damage has been done in 7 years. $18 trillion of debt. An EPA trying to regulate the water in our backyards. They created a new entitlement program. We can't afford the government we've got today. Got a president who declared war on trans fats, a truce with Iran. Got a president who can't even say the words radical Islamic terrorism. Won't stand with Israel as allowing Iran to become a nuclear power. We got a Supreme Court that thinks they're smarter than God in redefining marriage. We got a left that wants to take God out of the public square. We got more Americans on food stamps than ever before, record low participation rate in the workforce. And the list goes on and on and on. They're trying to change the American dream into the European nightmare. The idea of America is slipping away in front of us. And I don't know about you, but as long as I've got breath in my body, I'm going to do everything I can to fight to save the idea of America. The idea of America has created more wealth than any other civilization in the history of the world. It has done more to fight for freedom for the defenseless than any other civilization in the history of the world. Here's the good news. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to implement our conservative principles, to save the idea of America. This election is not about the Republican Party. It's about saving our country. The left, they are gift-wrapping this election for us. They're gift-wrapping. They're nominating Hillary Clinton, the weakest candidate they could find, who's running the worst campaign she could run. She's one email away from going to jail. They've got a socialist running again. You can't make this up. Bernie Sanders is a socialist, and he's running almost ahead of her in some of these polls. It used to be an insult in politics. When you used to call somebody a socialist, when you used to go on TV and say Barack Obama's a socialist, the media would get mad and say, well, now you're just name-calling. He calls himself a socialist. And he's doing well in the Democratic primary. That's where we are as a country. We've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to implement our principles. And this brings me to one of my last points. A couple of weeks ago, I gave a blistering speech where I went after Donald Trump. Some people liked it, some people didn't. Let me tell you why I did it. As long as I run, as long as I'm here, I'm going to continue to tell you the truth. Some of you will agree with me, some of you won't, but this is why I thought it was important to say this. I like the idea of Donald Trump. I really do. I love an outsider who's politically correct, who takes on the establishment. I think he's done a great service showing us the establishment's full of nonsense. I thought he was entertaining. I thought it was great when he gave Lindsey Graham's phone number out on live national TV. I thought it was funny when he showed people falling asleep at Jeb Bush's rallies. I thought it was great when he gave helicopter rides to kids at the Iowa State Fair. I thought that was terrific. But here's the problem. The idea of Donald Trump is great. The reality of Donald Trump is dangerous. He's a narcissist. He's not a conservative. He's not a liberal. He's not a conservative. He's not a Democrat. He's not an independent. He's not a Republican. He doesn't believe in anything but himself. He took Reagan's great line about making America great again, which is wonderful, but he wants to make Donald Trump great. You know, folks have pointed out he's for socialized medicine in the past, for higher taxes. That's not the real issue. Folks have said you can't put him next to the nuclear codes. That's not the real issue is he would implode in a general election if he were to get elected. We have no idea what he'd actually do. You know, he famously said his favorite book was the Bible. And then when asked, he couldn't name one scriptural verse that had an impact on his life. Folks, he hasn't read the Bible. You know he hasn't read the Bible because he's not in the Bible. He's not going to read a book that's not about him. But this isn't about Donald Trump. We've got as conservatives, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Let's turn to our proven conservative principles, not to a man who only believes in himself. Now, obviously, I think I'm that person. But the voters will decide that. You've heard I'm the only one that's reduced the size of government, but I'm happy to talk about all kinds of issues and policies. Here's the most important thing I want to share with you tonight. The idea of America is slipping away. It is not too late for us to get it back. But we don't have a moment to waste. I'm not asking to join a campaign, I'm asking to join a cause. I'm asking to believe again, to believe in America. I don't have a famous last name, my daddy wasn't president, I don't have a reality TV show. But I've got the backbone, I've got the bandwidth, I've got the experience to get us through this. I know who I am, I know whose I am. Look, here's reality. I want to be elected the next president. We need to elect the right person as president. It's not enough just to send any Republican there, but we also need a spiritual revival in this country. Let's be honest, just electing the right person by itself, that's not going to be enough. But the hour's not too late for us. I'm asking to believe again in America. When I was young, my dad taught me Americans could do anything. I believed him then, I believe him now. I think you believe that as well. I think you've been frustrated these last 7 years. I think you want to believe in America again as well. Don't wait till tomorrow, next week, next month. We're asking to sign up today. Join our cause. Let's get our country back. I can't do it alone. Working with you and with God's grace, I know we can get it done, but it is not optional. We have to win this election. God bless y'all, and thank y'all very, very much for allowing me to come speak to you.
I don't understand the nuclear option entirely. What I don't understand, though, is why one person in Congress, majority leader, can make a decision which represents everybody else, and the other 434 in Congress.
That's a great question. So the short answer to your question, then I'll get into all the technical. Here's the short answer to your question. I'm sorry, yeah, the question was, he said, I don't understand the nuclear option, but more specifically, he said, why does one person, the Senate Majority Leader, get to make a decision for the other 434 members, you know, all the other ones that don't get, and it's actually, I guess, you know, there's 99 more members in the Senate, 435 in the House, but anyway, 534 other members. Well, the short answer to your question is because they don't have enough backbone to stand up to them. Here's the strange thing. What's changed since Mitch McConnell got to be Majority Leader? He got a bigger office, that's great for him. What's changed for the rest of us? It's hard to tell the difference between when Harry Reid was running the place and when Mitch McConnell was running the place. Here's the nuclear option. This is what I mean by that. So the Senate had these rules. It's the Senate decorum that if they don't have 60 votes, they can't move on to actually debate an actual resolution or bill. So they've got more than 51 votes against the Iran deal, including some Democrats. But the Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, says, well, we tried, we couldn't get 60 votes, so they've never even actually voted on the actual Iran deal, the resolution to condemn the Iran deal, because they can't get the 60 votes to break what's called a filibuster. The nuclear option would say, you know what, we're going to let majority rule be enough. And they call it the so-called nuclear option because neither side wants it. You may have remembered a few years ago, Harry Reid tried to use a miniature version of the nuclear option to get judges approved. He said, I'm not going to let the Republicans stop all this. We're going to move forward. Here's the thing, when Democrats are in power, they're not scared about what the New York Times or the Washington Post says. They're not scared about not getting invited to the right cocktail parties. They're not scared they're going to be called names. When we get the majority, Mitch McConnell says, oh, we can't change those rules. That would be bad form. Folks, our country's at stake here. We're talking about Iran becoming a nuclear power. We're talking about folks chanting death to America, death to Israel. We're talking about other Middle Eastern countries. The Sunni countries aren't going to sit there and just let Iran become a nuclear power. We're talking about over $150 billion going to Iran to support terrorism and do whatever they want. If there was ever a time for our senators to stand up and say, we're going to use the nuclear option, we've got more than 50 votes, we're going to do this. And that's what I said to Lindsey Graham. I said, last week, I said, why don't you get on a plane? You're going to D.C., Thursday's the deadline, go and do this. And they won't do it. They're scared of their own shadows. That's why I think it's time. Look, I bet you we can find 535 better people in the country to represent us. They're great at passing laws and exempting them. They thought Obamacare was great when they exempted themselves. If it was so great, why don't they live under it? So that's the nuclear option. I think they should use it to stop, if it was ever a time to use it, let's use it to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power. Let's attach those sanctions to every bill that gets this president's desk. They've still got the power of the purse. Why don't they use it? They act like they have no power. They're an equal branch of government. They act like they can't do anything. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, so describe me, I'm sorry, I may not understand the question.
Trucks.
Right, the trucks stop running, the grocery stores are empty. Sure. Well, the question was, what would I do as president if there was a trauma, like the trucks stopped running, the grocery stores were empty? Let me tell you what I did do as governor. So in Hurricanes Gustav and Ike, we lost power for in some communities, several days, several weeks, and so grocery stores weren't going to be able to open, pharmacies weren't going to be open, fuel, and so it was kind of an equivalent of that, where all of a sudden we had to evacuate 1.9 million people. Now, largest evacuation in the country's history. I'll tell you two things we did that would be instructive to what I would do as president. Number one, you learn sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Now, what do I mean by that? There are FEMA rules. The federal government comes in a disaster like that, and they say, look, we'll help you get public infrastructure back up. We won't help you get private infrastructure back up. And I said, well, this is foolishness. If I don't get grocery stores open, people can't survive. They need food. If I can't get their medicines and fuel, federal government says, nope, we're not in the business of doing that. So I ordered my cabinet. I said, well, just ignore that. Go get generators. Get every big generator you can find, all along the Gulf Coast, all across the country, in Texas, wherever you can. Get those businesses open. Because if those grocery stores get back open, then people can stay in their communities. They don't have to evacuate to a Red Cross shelter. They don't have to leave. It's much better to keep people in place. So the first thing, you've got to be creative. Secondly, you find out sometimes in an emergency, you can't follow every rule. I'll tell you a quick story. I don't want to get anybody in the National Guard in trouble, but we literally had to get, to your point about trucks not running, we had to evacuate a lot of people really quickly. And there just weren't enough buses and trucks. And you need something called a commercial driver's license to drive one of these big buses. So I went to the National Guard, authorized the National Guard, and said, we got a lot of people, we got to move very quickly out of harm's way. 1.9 million people, never been done before. General, my adjutant general says, Governor, you give us the order, we can get it done. I said, really, you've got enough drivers? And I got in school buses, we commandeered the school buses, we got drivers, got everybody evacuated, no problems. So afterwards, once things had settled down, we had pods where we had distributed food and ice and water. And by the way, it was actually cheaper to cook hot meals, and the churches kicked in, than it was to give out MREs in some cases. We could give out hot meals cheaper than the government could give out MREs. So I'm at one of these pods, and I meet this young guardsman. He looked like he was 12. I was like, how in the world? I mean, he was obviously in school, and he'd left school, he'd been called up. And he told me, and the general was so proud, he goes, I want you to meet this guardsman, Governor, he was one of your guardsmen, he did a great job. And I said, son, what'd you do? He goes, well, sir, I drove one of those buses evacuating people. I said, well, that's fantastic. I said, you look so young. How in the world do you have a commercial driver's license? I mean, I can't believe somebody this young. I said, how long have you been driving trucks? Well, I was watching those, about 3 days, sir. I learned it. And the general comes and says, okay, Governor, that's enough. You don't need to talk to anymore. Let's keep going. And I told him afterwards, I'm proud of him. And I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but it was an emergency. And too often in these emergencies, what you'll get from the bureaucracy is, we got paperwork to fill out. We got rules to follow. We don't do that. When you're saving lives, we had another emergency. We had an oil spill in my state. And at one point, I'll just tell you real quickly this story. We had, you gotta love Cajun ingenuity. They came up with this idea. There's oil coming to the coast. They said, I got a call from a guy who literally said, hey, I got an idea. Why don't we go pump that oil out of the water? I said, what are you talking about? Well, he said, after Friday night football games, we have these pumps. We go to porta potty pumps. I mean, literally, and I don't want to be graphic here, but if you've ever been they got these pumps, they go and empty out the porta potties. That's what they do after high school football games. He said, why don't you get one of those, put it on the back of a boat, go pick up the oil? I said, that's a great idea. Well, I called up the federal government. No, we can't do that. They said, by the way, the oil's in the water. How are you going to get a pump out there? I mean, these are like big trucks. So we'll put one on the back of a boat. But we don't have a Navy, but we literally put one. We built two of these. The National Guard, again, goes out there. This thing looked so stupid. It looked like it was going to float. I mean, it did look like it was going to float. It looked awful, but it actually worked. Some guy sees this on TV, calls me up and says, Governor, we got commercial barges. You don't need to be doing this with trucks on the back of boats. We can do this. And before you knew it, we had barges out there picking up oil. I get a call from the White House. Actually, I think they sent it through the Coast Guard, but they said, all right, we got to shut down these pumps. These would actually work in picking up oil. They said, we got to do inspections. So what do you mean you got to do inspections? They said, they got to come back to port. We got to check their valves to make sure they're not dropping some oil back in the water. I said, are you kidding me? They're picking up thousands of gallons. You're worried about a couple of drops. I said, those are the rules. Then they realized how absurd this was. Then they changed their tune and they said, well, we also have to count the number of life vests and fire extinguishers on that. I said, you can't do that while they're working? And they said, those are the rules. I literally told Valerie Jarrett, I was on my way to the port. I said, look, I'm going to go order them back in the water. Gave them 24 hours to get this done. I said, if you don't give me authorization, they're going anyway. You're going to have to come stop us. By the time we got to the port, I think they were so embarrassed they canceled all the inspections. Said, all right, let them go. You can't wait. When you have an emergency, you can't have somebody who's never run anything before. We got a great first speaker in the White House today, a first-term senator who never ran anything. It takes somebody who knows when to question the bureaucracy, knows when to break the rules, knows when to just get things done, especially when lives are at stake. I'm sorry, I promise not every answer will be that long. I saw a couple other answers. Nobody will ask me a question again. Yes, sir.
Governor Jindal, thank you for coming today. I have a question about executive action, executive orders, and your opinion on that. Specifically, I wanted to kind of reference effective January 1st, the penalty phase for the Affordable Care Act is going to come into play. 26% of American companies are going to start facing fines as a result of the Affordable Care Act. What would you do as president when you see something like that come up, and knowing how slow Congress is to act? What is your opinion on executive orders?
Sure. Well, look, I think this president's abused his executive authority, specifically with Obamacare. They've chosen to implement parts of the law when they wanted to and suspended other parts when they wanted to, with no respect for the Constitution or the law or the way that it was written. I think that's wrong. My first act as president would be to repeal all of these illegal, unconstitutional executive orders. And so, for example, I think the EPA has exceeded their authority with the water rule, with the Clean Power rule, and there are a long list, the illegal amnesty and the rest of it. In terms of what I can do proactively with executive orders, for example, I would safeguard religious liberty. I would say, for example, the federal government's not going to discriminate against any individual or business that has a traditional view of marriage. I would certainly be able to instruct my HHS secretary, we're going to do everything we can on that first day, even before Congress gets here, to repeal as much of Obamacare as was done unconstitutionally or illegally. But it is going to take Congress. Let's be honest. I'd love to tell you with a stroke of a pen I could just get rid of all of Obamacare, because I do think the penalties and the taxes, I think the individual mandate's unconstitutional. I think this idea that the government can force you to buy something, I think that was such a mistake from the Chief Justice. I think that once you decide that, the Commerce Clause allows the federal government to do whatever they want, in essence. And I love that, they go into court saying it's not a tax. In court, they say, oh, it is a tax to justify it. Then they leave court and say it's not a tax. So I guess it was a tax for about 3 minutes, just long enough for them to say it was constitutional. So I would certainly do as much of it as I could legally, but it is going to take Congress to get rid of all of it. But I'm the only candidate with a plan to get rid of all of it. And we have to get rid of all of it, not only because it's bad for businesses and the economy, but it's bad for freedom and health care. It was sold to us on a lie. It doesn't reduce costs. It doesn't improve quality of care. It makes more people dependent on government. It spends money we don't have. But think about it this way. If you went back in time and told Senator Obama, if you push through Obamacare, you're going to lose your House majority. You won't be able to do anything else, practically, as president. You won't be able to pass a bunch of other big laws. I bet you he still would have done it. Folks, that's what I mean. We've got to be just as vigilant in fighting for freedom. If the other side is willing to fight that hard for socialism, why won't we fight that hard for freedom? And even in hindsight, I think he understands that was the biggest expansion of government. Gets the government more involved in our lives, gives them more power over our health care. Why won't we fight just as hard to get our freedom back? If they're willing to fight that hard for socialism, we should have the courage and the backbone and the willingness to say, you know what, I might lose a majority, but if we had the White House, we had the House for 6 of the 8 years and the Senate for a lot of that time. And I'm grateful that they kept us safe after 9/11. I am. I don't mean to trivialize that. But what conservative reforms did they get that were just as important to us as Obamacare is to them? And he only had the House and Senate for 2 years. When we get in there, we better be just as forceful fighting for freedom. And fighting for, I see somebody getting up, that means that my time's up.
We're getting there.
All right, well, yes, sir.
Maybe one more.
Thank you for running and getting your name forward. You mentioned $18 trillion in debt or deficit spending every year. Tell us what you would do to help solve that budget issue.
Well, first of all, I'm the only one that has cut spending. We cut our budget 26%, 30,000 fewer state bureaucrats. Nobody else running for president has cut government spending. None of the other governors running, none of the senators. They give great speeches and filibusters. I'm glad they've got big bladders. That's not enough to be president. Specifically, what I would do is this, 3 things. One, we got the federal government doing a lot of things it shouldn't be doing in the first place. And we need to cut back. Federal Department of Education spends billions of dollars on teacher quality, doesn't improve teacher quality. Get rid of those programs or block grant the dollars to the states. Title I dollars, block grant to the states or let the dollars follow the child. Why is the Federal Department of Education making curriculum decisions like Common Core, or making school lunchroom decisions, or why is the federal government getting involved with the school expulsion policies? Education should be a local state issue. The only thing they should be doing is transparency, deregulation, and true civil rights enforcement. Dramatically cut back the size of the Federal Department of Education so they can't blackmail states into doing what they want by withholding their funding, their own funding. You look at the EPA. Why in the world are they going into our backyards to regulate our waters? This president doesn't understand or believe in the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. If he did, he would understand at the state level, we want to keep our environment safe. We don't need the EPA micromanaging from DC. DC doesn't know better. They're not in charge of everything. Shrink the size of the IRS, a lower, flatter tax code. You wouldn't need all these IRS employees, and you wouldn't have this power in the hands of the government to go after conservative groups. I worry they're going to go after Christian groups based on their beliefs on marriage next. The Solicitor General said maybe. He didn't say no when they asked him about that in the Supreme Court. Agency after agency, we need to shrink. I don't mean slow the growth rate. I mean shrink the size of the federal government. Secondly, you have to make structural changes. Seems like when we send Republicans there, they grow government slowly, but they still grow it. Democrats grow it quickly. Not only do you need term limits, like I said before, you need a balanced budget amendment. Supermajority vote before they can raise our taxes. Supermajority vote before they can grow government spending faster than the American economy. Now, they're not going to like it, but we're going to have to force that. Line item vetoes, we get rid of all the earmarks and the nonsense. We have those things in Louisiana's budget, and that's what's allowed us to cut our spending, even with a Democratic majority my first term. But we're going to have to force that down their throats, and we're going to need your help. They're not going to want to vote for that. We're going to have to tell them, yes or no, vote for this, and go home, because the voters are going to tell you, if you don't vote for it, we're kicking you out. Third, we have to grow the American economy. We have to roll back these regulations. I think that every regulation should have an independent cost-benefit analysis. Any regulation that costs our economy needs to go up or down vote in the Congress. I think that Congress needs to pass laws saying these agencies are not allowed to do these things, are only allowed to do the things we explicitly give them authority for. You've got unelected bureaucrats going wild. So you grow the American economy, but let's be really clear. This is either or. You either grow the government economy or the American economy. You can't do both. 7 of the 10 fastest growing counties recently have been in the DC area. Folks, that's not a real economy. That's not sustainable. No wonder in DC they think everything's fine. 2% growth seems great to them because they're surrounded by the special interests. They don't know what it's like in the real world. And that's why the most important change is getting real citizen legislators in there. The Founding Fathers intended our leaders to have to leave their farms, their businesses, to go as a sacrifice and service temporarily. They thought Obamacare was great until we asked them, why do you have an exemption then? If it's such a good law, why'd they exempt themselves? And I think once you get that, if they have to live in the real world economy, I bet you they'd be a lot more worried about how fast it was growing. But I think that's what we have to do and make it, let's be very clear. In DC, if an agency gets $100 today and they want $110 tomorrow, Congress gives them $105, they call that a cut. That's not a cut. When I say cut, I mean they get less money than they got the year before. We have fewer federal employees than the year before. We've got to reform our entitlement programs as well. And I don't want to start a whole new topic, we'll be here all night, but I will tell you, I was the executive director of the Medicare Commission in the 90s. The sooner we do those changes, the easier they can be. We can grandfather people in and phase them in. But the bottom line is the federal government's got to stop doing all these things it has no business doing in the first place. It has grown too big, too expensive, too intrusive, too expansive into our lives. And it's time to shrink it down to size. And if we don't do it now, we're done. If we don't do that, we'll become Europe. The American dream is not to have the government take care of it. The American dream is not about redistribution, taxing, spending, borrowing, regulating. If we allow that to happen on our watch, shame on us. I'll close with this. We're all going to be held to account. What did we do to save the idea of America? I don't know about you. My commitment to you is I'm willing to fight with everything I've got. Because one day I'm going to have to answer for that. We're going to have to answer to our children, our grandchildren. We're going to have to answer to posterity. What did we do to save the idea of America? This is a blessed land. Nobody can take it away from us. We dare not give it away. That's what this election is about. I don't know about you. I'm ready to fight for my country, and I hope you are as well. God bless y'all. Thank y'all very much for that.